non-essential. A separate financial support package for employers, workers and those who have lost their jobs is also expected to be unveiled. And that press conference, it is due to begin at government buildings in the next couple of minutes. We will bring it to you, all the events live, along with reaction and analysis. Just to let you know, we have our correspondent Robert Short in studio, along with Chief Economist with Davy Connell-McQuillan. But first to you, Robert. We have an idea, don't we, of what we can expect to hear in a little while, certainly in the financial side.
Yes, so we've been expected to hear that there will be some form of a wage subsidy scheme that will be there. We're beginning to get some details on that. And there will also be an increased COVID welfare payment that's also going to be there. Now, I understand the package is going to be of a scale of about €3.7 billion. That's in addition to the $3 billion or so that's already been announced from the government at the start of this crisis. So that's going to supplement what's already there. So that you'll probably see €150 on the COVID payment, and then a scheme to basically ensure that 70% of wages for companies that hold on to their staff, even though they are coming under pressure, are supplemented by this scheme that the government will introduce.
Right, so the incentive, Connell, is to keep people at work, keep money sloshing around the economy while we go through this financial turmoil.
It is, and I suppose when you think of the stimulus, we're seeing 2% of GDP. That's in and around the pack of what we're seeing in Europe, a little bit smaller than maybe in the UK. But I think the goal here is not to try to pretend we can offset the impact of the shutdown in sectors of our economy. Is to protect the incomes of workers and businesses and make sure that through this temporary period that those companies and workers who are in trouble are just sustained and don't have real difficulties in terms of their own cash flow.
And yet we know, or we have an idea, that this is likely to be something that will last for a number of weeks, presumably with the option there to roll it over for a more extended period of time. Robert?
Well, I understand it's initially 12 weeks, but with the proviso that that'll be under review. So like everything we've been hearing throughout this crisis, it's an evolving situation. But at least for the 12-week period from now, there is going to be a package of supports there for business. Now, I suppose just to give some kind of context for all of this, this is essentially, really detailed social, economic and business planning being done more or less on the fly. So, I suppose businesses and people out there who may have already lost their jobs or are in a precarious position, that, things are happening, things will be put in place, and they are moving very quickly.
Yes.
Now, there may have been some missteps earlier on. There was some confusion over initially what companies could claim back in terms of what they were going to subsidise their workers to stay on. I think will be a lot clearer today. There'll obviously still be a lot of questions yet to answer. But I suppose the important thing to stress is that there will be an income subsidy scheme there. It will guarantee up to 70% or thereabouts, and it will be for a maximum of, in net terms, so after tax, €410 per week.
And the option, as Robert said there a little earlier on, to top up beyond that again. Connell, we are really dealing with, as I said, trying to keep people in a job, trying to keep the economy going. It will still be difficult, though, won't it, under the circumstances, particularly when you have businesses closing?
It will. We have various commentators expecting a double-digit decline in GDP in Europe in the second quarter. We could see the same in Ireland. We can't rule it out. Right. But again, it's not so much to counteract the decline in business activity, which is inevitable because of the measures that have been taken. It's just to support income. So it's supporting companies where they may have difficulties with their cash flow, paying their own debts. We've seen the moves to allow banks to put a 3-month payment moratoria there. Yeah. The same for households, making sure that if they get in trouble with their mortgage payments, they have the income, or we have a bit of flexibility in terms of paying the debt. So it's just about supporting people through what should be a temporary period.
Where is that money coming from? I mean, I heard reports that we could be looking at something in the order of 15 billion in a year. Where does that money come from?
Well, before all this started, we were expecting a surplus around 1% of GDP this year. We've already had 3 billion in terms of stimulus.
Forgive me, Connell, I'm going to come back to you on that one. But let's cross over now because the Taoiseach is about to begin.
Thanks for writing, everyone. The Taoiseach is going to kick off, followed by Minister Harris and the Chief Medical Officer, and we'll have a short opportunity for questions on health.
Good afternoon, everyone. This morning, the Cabinet met to decide on the next steps that the Government will take to respond to the coronavirus emergency. These are unprecedented actions to respond to an unprecedented emergency. We agreed actions in three areas. First, new measures to slow the spread of the virus, as recommended by the CMO and the National Public Health Emergency Team, an expert team of public health doctors, virologists and scientists. Second, new measures to assist those who have lost or will lose their jobs as a consequence of the emergency, and a scheme to ensure that many others do not and remain on the payroll rather than being laid off. And third, new emergency legislation that we're asking the Dáil and Shannon to enact by the end of the week. Before I go through them in detail, I want to once again thank all of you for contributing to this great national effort. Thank you to our health service staff and our civil servants as well, our local authorities, our volunteers and NGOs, our defence forces, our Gardaí, our retailers, farmers and transport workers, carers and care workers, postal workers, and those working in industry like pharma, food production, food service and medical devices. And thanks to everyone who's helping out and helping others in a million different ways. Anyone in religious life, our journalists and broadcasters, everyone doing their best to raise the spirits of our country. You're rising to this challenge, and the nation is grateful. This morning, NPHET met and has recommended some new actions to help us slow the virus. We've accepted its advice, and the advice will be published in full today in accordance with standard practice. Above all, I want to thank the people of Ireland for listening to the advice when it comes to physical distancing, regular hand washing, taking care when sneezing and coughing, and reducing the number of social events and gatherings that you attend. It's too early to know for sure, but we do believe it's making a difference. However, we believe we need to do more. We need to flatten the curve and suppress the virus. So I'm asking you to stay at home, if at all possible. This is the best way to slow the virus, ensure our hospitals are not overwhelmed, and buy us time that we need to build more capacity, testing, contact tracing, beds and ventilators. So you should only leave home to go to work if you can't work from home and your attendance is essential. You should only go to the shops for essential supplies, out for medical and dental appointments, or to care for others or take physical exercise. Non-essential indoor visits to other people's homes should be avoided, and social gatherings of individuals outdoors should be of no more than 4 people, unless you're all from the same household. We're in this for the long haul, and this could go on for weeks, perhaps even months. So we need to maintain our humanity as well. And it is okay to see our families and loved ones, because we have to look after our mental health as well as our physical health. But we have to maintain physical distance, do it in small groups only, and much less frequently than we would have in the past. No unnecessary travel should take place within the country or overseas, now or over the Easter break. In order to assist all of this, the restrictions I announced in Washington, D.C. are being extended until Sunday, the 19th of April. And the following new actions are being taken, effective from midnight tonight. All theatres, clubs, gyms, leisure centres, hairdressers, betting offices, marts, markets, casinos, bingo halls, libraries and other similar outlets are to shut. All hotels to limit occupancy to essential, non-social and non-tourist reasons. All non-essential retail outlets are to close to members of the public, and all other retail outlets are to implement physical distancing. A list of essential retail outlets and stores is being provided. All cafes and restaurants should limit supply to takeaways and deliveries only. All sporting events are cancelled, including those held behind closed doors. All playgrounds and holiday caravan parks will close. All places of worship are to restrict numbers entering at any one time to ensure adequate physical distancing. All organised social indoor and outdoor events of any size are not to take place. The Gardaí will increase interventions where venues are not in compliance with or where groups of people are not adhering to recommended social distancing. All household contacts of a suspect case, that is somebody waiting on a test or a test result, should restrict their movements until the test is reported as negative or 14 days after the onset of symptoms, whichever is the shorter. As I mentioned earlier, individuals should work from home unless attendance at the workplace is absolutely essential, and social gatherings of individuals outdoors should be of no more than 4 people unless all are from the same household. All non-essential indoor visits to other persons' homes should be avoided. All crowded places, including public amenities, should be avoided as well. And all scheduled cruise ship travel to Ireland will cease. Any setting that should close has been specifically identified today. And the requirement that workers work from home, unless attendance is absolutely essential, is not to be read as meaning the factories or construction sites have to be shut. The authorities are available to work with employers and unions on how to make physical distancing effective where that's possible. There's going to be an increased presence of park rangers and Gardaí in parks and public places to ensure that physical distancing is being observed. In Ireland, since independence, we've always had policing by consent rather than by coercion, and I don't intend for that to change now. That's not our way. The new powers afforded to the Gardaí will be used sparingly and only where necessary. Let's all play our part to ensure they're not used at all. I believe a liberal democracy can do this without the need for authoritarian or draconian actions. The impact of Covid-19 on our economy and employment has been sudden and will be enormous. I believe we need to maintain social solidarity, unity and a sense of community in this time of trial. In recognition of the fact that so many fellow citizens have lost their jobs so suddenly, we're raising the Covid unemployment payment to €350 a week. That's approximately 75% of average earnings in the sectors most affected and compares favourably with what's being done in other jurisdictions. The first payments will be made on Friday. The Covid illness benefit for people who are self-isolating will also increase to €350 per week, and that can be topped up by employers. In order to encourage employers and companies badly affected by the emergency to keep staff on the payroll, a wage subsidy scheme will be introduced to co-fund 70% of the cost of salaries up to a maximum of €38,000 a year. So for a salary of €38,000, the subsidy would equate to €410 a week in take-home pay. The cost of all of this will be great, many billions of euros in the coming months. But we can bear it, and we will be able to pay it back as a nation. We do so willingly because it's the right thing to do, and because we owe it to our fellow citizens. I strongly believe that maintaining the link between employees and employers and companies will make it easier for us to bounce back when this is all over. We'll keep our economic infrastructure intact, and will give business the best chance possible of making it through. The self-employed will also be covered, and I know the sacrifices that many of our self-employed have made to build up their businesses and practices, and I know how worried they are at the moment, how vulnerable they feel. And government will do everything we can to help sustain you and bring you through this emergency as well. Ministers Donoghue, Humphreys and Doherty will set out in more detail how these measures will apply. Finally, Cabinet this morning approved the emergency measures in the public interest COVID bill. This legislation, for the duration of the emergency, will freeze rents, prevent evictions, make it easier for healthcare professionals to re-register and return to work, and enable former members of our defence forces to rejoin at the rank at which they left. We need you to serve your country once again and to strengthen our nation at this difficult time. We also approved a framework agreement with the private hospitals. They will operate effectively as public hospitals under Section 38 of the Health Act for the duration of the emergency, thus adding over 2,000 beds, 9 laboratories, critical care capacity and thousands of staff to our health service. Public and private patients will be treated equally, and private hospitals have agreed to do this on a not-for-profit basis. And I really want to thank them for their cooperation in this regard. I briefed the leaders of the other parties yesterday, and we'll be briefing spokespeople today and during the week. In contrast to what we've seen in some other countries, our political parties have united against a common foe, and I want to thank them for their understanding, goodwill and cooperation to date. Finally, another reminder to everyone to follow the public health advice and keep following the 5 key steps. They might seem simple, but they are vital to protect us all and to protect our loved ones. Regular hand washing, coughing etiquette, not touching your face, physical distance, and staying at home if feeling unwell. We cannot yet stop this virus, but working together, we can slow it in its tracks and push it back. These are extraordinarily difficult times for everyone in Ireland and around the world. But no matter what happens, we'll always put your life and your health ahead of any other concern. All of our resources are being deployed in this great national effort, and I know that the Irish people will continue to face this head on, to make the changes to our lifestyles that are required and pull through to the other side. 4 years ago, we commemorated the 1916 Rising, and we celebrated the men and women who helped us win our freedom and independence. I never believed we'd be called upon to match their courage or example, but today we are. Working together as a country, we will come through this emergency. We'll be tested, but we will succeed. Our greatest generation was not in the past, and better times are yet to come. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Taoiseach. As we navigate through this very difficult public health emergency, we've clearly asked the Irish people to make real and great sacrifices. If we're being honest, it's all a bit surreal for people. People didn't see this coming. This is something that came upon us as a country and a world so quickly. We've asked people to behave perhaps counterintuitively. And the Irish people have risen. They've risen to that challenge. And we are, as the Chief Medical Officer outlined yesterday, beginning to see early and encouraging signs. But now is clearly the time to do more. This is a virus that knows no borders and no boundaries. And there are no easy options. If there were, we'd take them. But we can show the world what can be achieved through intensive, sustained public health action. At a time when we need national unity of purpose, we must, of course, have equality of treatment. Patients with this virus will be treated for free, and they'll be treated as part of a single national hospital service. As the Taoiseach outlined, today I received government approval that for the duration of this crisis, the state will take control of all private hospital facilities and manage all of the resources for the common benefit of all of our people. There can be no room for public versus private when it comes to pandemic. And while we're asking much of people, we are matching restrictive measures with the comprehensive public health toolkit. We're matching it with measures that have been commended by the World Health Organization as the right mix of tools. This will include increased testing capacity and linked contact tracing. But we've also, as the Taoiseach outlined, embarked now on a number of new restrictions and new measures. Through government decisions, the mobilisation of communities, which is going to be so important, and the leadership of our incredible healthcare professionals, we can have a profound effect on the impact of this pandemic on our people. But we can do more. We can save lives too. Often in the middle of a pandemic, something that seems so big, so global, we can perhaps feel so powerless. But the truth is, as individuals, we have an awful lot of power when it comes to slowing the spread of this virus. We clearly have so many heroes manning our front lines, but we need everyone in this country to be a hero. Be a hero in their own home, be a hero in their community. You can be a hero by taking the actions that will save lives. As a government, we must be and we will be responsive. But as a people, we must be and we will be responsible. We will be honest with you at all times, and we'll make the tough decisions. But we need you to make these decisions work. We need you to make these decisions really impactful. And this will mean some separation, but that need not mean division. For never was it truer that united we will stand and divided we will fall. Where we can no longer reach out with our hands, we must now reach out with our hearts. Keep our distance, but keep in touch. Stay apart, but stay in contact. To everyone who's already trying to do the strange new things we're asking, our message is simple: please do more. If you think you're already doing everything you can, our message is simple: please do more. And if, let's be honest, you haven't fully started to do the things that we're asking, please start now, and then please do more. Because the more we do together, the more lives we can save together. It is literally in the hands of the Irish people.
Thank you, Minister Taoiseach. We're at an early stage, as we've said, in the progression of this illness, and we've seen much that gives us encouragement in terms of the response of the public to the measures that we've already recommended. One of the most significant early indicators that we've seen is that the number of cases that we see, or contacts that we see associated with an individual case, has dropped from in and around 20 a week ago to less than 5 now. That shows that the message is getting through, and that the message will get through if it continues in that way to help us to push out the infection and the growth in cases. But we have seen other signs that have caused us to ask government to mandate more measures and to ask the Irish people to work a little harder with us to try to ensure that we minimise the transmission of this virus through the population. And so on the basis that we have now identified in the country in excess of 1,000 cases, that we have now experienced, sadly, 6 deaths, that we've experienced a day-on-day increase in the number of admissions to intensive care units in our country, that 45% of the cases that we've diagnosed so far have been community transmissions where we've not been able to identify the source of infection for those individuals, and where 1 in 4 of the cases that we've identified are healthcare workers. We think that these signs tell us that we need to move, as the ECDC has recommended again in its updated advice in relation to social distancing yesterday, that we move rapidly, coherently, comprehensively and decisively to recommend a step up in the terms of the measures that we've mandated. And it was for those reasons that we asked and advised government on the measures that have now been announced today.
Okay, we have time for just a few short questions now before we move into the economic briefing. It's important to state that the Chief Medical Officer will be doing his regular briefing this evening, where there will be an opportunity for further questions to him there. First question, Paul Conn.
Taoiseach, can I ask you, would you use the word lockdown to describe the measures which you are announcing today? And secondly, can you explain a little bit more about the question of citizens' rights, particularly in the case where they don't do what they're being asked to do? You say the Gardaí will be sparing in these increased interventions, but does that mean the citizen who doesn't do what they're supposed to do face either a fine or indeed could they face detention? Thank you.
Yeah, the legislation we passed last week empowers the Gardaí to detain people who may pass on COVID-19 to others, but we'd hope that that power is only used sparingly, if at all. But what Gardaí park rangers will be doing a little bit more of is a bit more of a visible presence on the streets and in public places, encouraging groups to disperse, encouraging people to move on, so that we don't have the scenes that we saw on Sunday, which we haven't really seen most days, but we did see on Sunday, of overcrowding in public places, which really went against everything that was being advised up until now. But I don't want to be berating people in any way. I'm sure all those people who turned up in the Phoenix Park at Glendalough didn't realise it was going to be so crowded, but what we will now have is a much stronger Garda presence and park ranger presence to make sure that doesn't happen and to encourage people to disperse and to move on. I wouldn't use the term lockdown, and that's for very good reasons. I've come to learn over the past week or two that lockdown seems to mean very different things to different people and in different countries, and therefore can cause confusion, and we need clarity rather than confusion. So I saw, for example, even though he didn't use the term, the changes announced in the UK as being a lockdown of the UK. Yet when you look at the detail of what's being announced in the UK, people can still go to work, still go to the shops, the bank, the post office, even B&Q, the pet food store, go for a run and meet with another person outside. So that, in my mind, isn't a total lockdown. And I had heard that Italy was in a total lockdown, and yet I found out only a few days ago that there were still factories and construction sites open. So I think it's a term that actually causes more confusion than clarity, and therefore is one that I wouldn't use and don't intend to use in future.
Taoiseach, you said that you would encourage people to visit families in a controlled setting for their good mental health. At the weekend, we were told to stay away from your mothers, grandparents, not to visit their grandkids. Are you now saying that, for example, grandparents can visit their grandkids, people can visit their mother, but the Minister for Health said we should still maintain distance? And secondly, you said that factories and construction sites will remain open, subject to they'll be able to implement physical distancing. How are you going to tell if a construction site, a building site, is regulating with physical distancing?
Yeah, that's one of the things we're going to have to work on, working with employers, working with unions. Construction sites tend to be outdoors, which is obviously much better than being indoors. And there are some that are essential, some that are constructions that's being carried out for pharmaceutical companies, for medical devices, healthcare establishments. So in the same way as when it comes to essential retail, we have to manage the risk. We would propose to do something similar when it comes to construction, but very much want the authorities, NSAI, the environmental health officers, the Health and Safety Authority, to work with employers and unions to get that right where it can be got right. It may not be possible to get it right everywhere, but we certainly can get it right somewhere, in some places, just like we have with a lot of the retail outlets. On the first part of your question, just to be clear, I'm not encouraging people to visit relatives. What we're saying is that social interactions need to reduce considerably by 75% or more. But we're not saying that people can never see their family or friends or relatives. What we're saying is that must happen much less frequently. It must only be in small groups. Ideally not visits to other people's homes, and if it does happen, it needs to be done with social distancing and all of those precautions that we mentioned, like hand washing and so on.
Taoiseach, in terms of just clarity on essential and non-essential, how can businesses go about that to find out? I know there's a list been released today to make sure that they are doing the right thing. And also, secondly, you've talked about the importance of an all-island approach to this. Are you satisfied that the measures you're announcing today are enough in step with what's happening in the north, that there won't be any sort of two different regimes working against each other, if you like?
We do have a list which we can distribute of what are deemed to be essential and non-essential retail outlets, and anything that has to be closed was specifically mentioned either in my contribution or the letter from the CMO. There will be differences between North and South. We're doing our best to coordinate. Generally speaking, Northern Ireland is taking its lead from the UK, from COBRA and from London, whereas we're taking our advice from our Chief Medical Officer, NEFIT, the European Centre for Disease Control and the World Health Organization. So, for example, schools are still partially open in Northern Ireland and in the UK. They're totally closed here. We are saying that gatherings of up to 4 people in the outdoors are acceptable. They're saying 2. And if you look across Europe, there are differences. And I know that does cause confusion. But the circumstances are different in different states. And we're very much behind the outbreak in the UK, and they're behind the outbreak in Italy and Spain. But in terms of what we're doing, we're actually ahead of the curve in terms of taking action. And it's not just about social distancing and social restrictions. What we have is what the World Health Organization recommends, which is a comprehensive strategy. So social distancing, social restrictions, but also a lot of testing, a lot of contact tracing and quarantine. And that's the South Korean model. It's the model used in Singapore. So far, it seems to be the most effective model to contain the virus, and that's the model we're pursuing. I'm not sure if the CMO wants to add anything to that.
So it's that set of comprehensive measures, as the Taoiseach says, that we've recommended in each of the steps where we've stepped up the response. We believe we've done it early, at an early stage in the disease, and responding quickly to things that we've seen or trends that we see that give us cause for concern. I've outlined some of those that triggered this new set of recommendations. Similarly, 10 days ago, we responded to early changes that we had seen in the number of cases in the population to enable us to as it were, get ahead of this. And we've done that in a structured way. It's not just a single measure or a couple of measures. It's a comprehensive set of coherent, mutually reinforcing measures for the whole of society to adopt, to reinforce the messages that we've had from the beginning around personal responsibility and personal behaviours, as the Taoiseach outlined earlier on. And we believe that's the most effective, likely strategy. It's consistent with what the WHO has recommended, and that we use that in conjunction with a clear public health strategy to identify as many cases as we possibly can, to make the recommendation to people to isolate themselves if they have symptoms, contact their GP, follow the advice of their GP in relation to testing from that point forward, and then the public health teams to institute effective contact tracing. And it's those methods that we think will be impactful, and the information that I gave you earlier on in terms of the reduction in the number of contacts for cases is, if you like, a proxy indicator giving us some encouragement that the public is listening, and that the impact that we're seeking to have, we have some encouragement that we will see as we move along. But we now need, for the reasons that I set out for you earlier on, in terms of the impact that we're now seeing, particularly in terms of ICU hospitalisations, the need for us to begin to move with the measures that have been outlined today.
Taoiseach, just a couple of points of clarity first, if I can. Can you just clarify that the family members of those who are displaying symptoms and who are now been asked to self-isolate as a precaution, will they be entitled to illness benefit from day one to make sure that they have financial security? When you talk about restaurants being asked to restrict their services to takeaway, does that mean that you will show some latitude to restaurants who don't currently have planning permission to act as takeaways, who are only supposed to have dine-in? And on a broader point, some of what you've announced today are things that governments have said in the past that they could never do. The idea of freezing rents, a moratorium on evictions, co-opting the private healthcare system. What would be your message to people who think that that is the situation that Ireland should be observing all the time?
Yeah, sorry, so many questions there. I think your first question was, will the COVID illness benefit apply to household members who also have to self-isolate? The answer to that is yes, and that is a change from the advice from before, but that is the case. So if you're in a household that's being asked to self-isolate, then you will also be eligible for the COVID illness benefit. I could go into a lot of different issues in and around things, for example, like a ban on evictions or rent controls. Some people make an argument around constitutionality, but property rights are always subject to the common good in our constitution. I don't think anyone would argue that this is an extraordinary situation where the common good applies. But also certainly where we've argued against rent freezes, it's on the basis that a long-term freeze in rents would actually make things worse. It would reduce the supply of new housing, for example. It would mean what's happened in San Francisco, for example, landlords selling up and selling their properties on to people who then live in them. So therefore less rental properties becoming available. But this is a temporary measure. It's only for a few weeks, hopefully for 12 weeks. So the kind of things that we saw in San Francisco, fewer rental properties being available because of landlords leaving. Berlin, an investment strike with less new apartments going to construction. We don't think those things will happen when you do something as a temporary 12-week measure. Hopefully it's only 12 weeks, than you would as a permanent change in policy. Yeah, good question. That's such one of the things Minister Murphy is looking into, because restaurants that are now providing a delivery or a takeout service are providing a very valuable service. Irish people get about a quarter or 20% of our calories from takeaway meals, believe it or not. So that is actually an important service, and some don't have planning permission to do it. So that is one that I will follow up on from here, because I know it has come up, but we don't have a straight answer to it yet.
We're going to be joined by some other ministers for the economic briefing to speak with staying, and there's time for questions at the end of this as well. So thanks very much.
And that was the Taoiseach there finishing up that government press centre press conference. We can see Minister Regina Doherty now emerge onto the podium along with Minister Heather Humphreys and Pascal Donoghue taking his pew there, also Minister for Finance, to give us a little bit more detail on the financial package that the Taoiseach alluded to.
We are, as the Minister for Health said a moment ago, accosted by a pandemic that knows no borders and knows no boundaries. And in turn, this public health crisis risks an economic crisis. But if this public health crisis is like no other, then this economic crisis is also very different to others. It requires a different response. It needs speed and it needs scale. And this is because the very severe disruption that has occurred has placed otherwise healthy and viable businesses in jeopardy. Our citizens are under great strain. However, we will come through this but this requires further action. Failure to act in line with the scale of this crisis would be too damaging for our society and for our economy. Failure to act now, I fear, risks even greater economic challenges and difficulties in the future. It would also fail to abide by a central tenet of our social contract, the need for our state to respond at a time of great risk. So this is why today the government agreed a set of unprecedented measures. And my colleagues Heather and Regina, who worked on all of these different elements, will take you through all of them in detail. But the driving instinct behind these measures is the need to provide income support to those who need income support, while also giving confidence to employers to retain their employees. So when this crisis passes, the country can get back to work as quickly and as seamlessly as possible. Excuse me. To state it very clearly, support income to keep those in work at work, and by doing so, build economic demand and get ready to rebuild our living standards in our immediate future. So the wage subsidy scheme agreed today is a payment to employers to encourage, to get them to retain employees on their payroll during this period. It will be available to all employers who suffer either a minimum of 25% decline in turnover, an inability to pay normal wages and outgoings, and other circumstances as will be set out in revenue guidelines. For the next 12 weeks, such employers will be supported in the order of 70% of an employee's income, and the maximum weekly tax-free payment will be €410 per employee. This is, as the Taoiseach said earlier, equivalent to 70% of the net weekly income for someone on €38,000 per annum. For those earning between €38,000 and €76,000, the subsidy will be capped at €350 and implemented through guidance to be prepared by the Revenue Commissioner. So this will provide tapered support up to €76,000. And I am making this decision through government in recognition of the scale of this economic shock and the fact that it could impact on many sectors and many different kinds of jobs. The government also agreed today to increase the rate of the weekly emergency payment, and this was done because we have a clear duty to those who have just lost their job and experienced a massive and very sudden change in living standards. We are in exceptional times. The health of our people and ensuring we remain safe is our number one priority. So this strategy recognises the consequences of our public health challenge, but lays the foundations for economic recovery. The measures that the government is taking today aim to deliver that. They are designed to provide comfort, to provide reassurance to concerned citizens at a time of unprecedented economic risk. The government estimates that these measures will cost approximately €3.7 billion for a 12-week period. This is an estimate. The cost will vary in response to the breadth and nature of the shock. And as this is an emergency measure, it will lapse after 12 weeks. There will clearly be a significant impact on the public finances as a result of the scale of this intervention. But we must act now to avoid an even greater economic challenge in the future. And this response through our expenditure policy is crucial in dealing with this challenge. It will require a significant increase in our borrowing requirement in the months and maybe years ahead. However, we entered this crisis in a position of real strength. Our debt profile has improved significantly over the past 5 years, and our prudent management of the public finances has enhanced our sovereign credit rating. Supporting a proportion of the income of our citizens and thereby retaining a job, retaining a relationship with the employer during this crisis is the right and proper response of the state. The government has acted and will act this week, assuming the passage of required legislation. And this is because in these days, in these months of adversity, the care, the protection of our citizens is our abiding concern.
Thank you, Pascal. Good afternoon, everyone. And today the government is entering into an economic partnership with businesses and employers nationwide so that we can support them and their staff through this unprecedented crisis. It's hard to believe that just a few short weeks ago, Ireland was at full employment with record numbers at work. Practically overnight, the economic and employment landscape in our country has been utterly transformed by Covid-19. This crisis may be unprecedented, but it will pass. Through the measures announced today, we want to ensure that businesses are able to keep their employees on their books so that when we come out the other side, Ireland and our citizens can get back to work as quickly as possible. By keeping that crucial link between the employer and the employee, we will be best placed to kickstart the economy once again. While this is an extremely worrying time for businesses and workers, it's also worth remembering that for many firms, there are ways to use this time productively. For example, it could be a once-off opportunity to put staff on online training courses, get feedback from employees that you wouldn't usually have time to engage with, consider how you could make your business leaner, more innovative and more competitive, and draw up plans to improve productivity, consider new markets and future opportunities. In the meantime, through this new initiative, the government will support businesses so that they can continue to pay their employees. As Minister for Business, I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank the countless retail staff who are working around the clock to ensure that our supermarket shelves remain full during this difficult time. I meet regularly with the retail and grocery distribution sector who continue to assure me that we have a strong pipeline of products for our citizens. I would also like to thank the many people working behind the scenes to make this possible. Farmers, producers, hauliers, palleting and logistics companies, ports, ferry companies and many more. And I also want to acknowledge those who provide necessary products and services in the medtech and pharma sector and indeed those who support them. Today's announcement supplements the wide range of supports that we have already made available to businesses. They include the €200 million working capital loan scheme, which is open for applications on the SPCI website, and loans of up to €500,000 can be obtained unsecured. Loans of up to €50,000 through Microfinance Ireland with no interest or repayments for 6 months. The Credit Guarantee Scheme with loans of up to €1 million, including the option of refinancing existing loans. The local enterprise offices in every county are offering vouchers from €2,500 to €10,000 to support business preparedness. And the most impacted businesses can defer the payment of commercial rates for 3 months. The banks have also signed up to a number of measures to support businesses with loan and mortgage forbearance for 3 months. And these are just some examples. The new COVID-19 wage subsidy scheme will be a significant additional support, with the state funding up to 70% of wages, with no PRSI payable. It will result in a significant wage reduction for impacted businesses. The increase in the pandemic unemployment payments, including for the self-employed people, together with illness benefits, are also important additions. And I think it's important to say that this payment is available to those that are self-employed. All that said, this situation is changing from day to day, and I will continue to work across government and collaborate with businesses and the representative bodies to ensure that we are doing everything we can to protect and support Irish businesses. Thank you. Pass you over to Regina.
Thanks, Heather. I think Pascal is right when he says that we're living in exceptional times, and this virus is presenting a once-in-a-century challenge to Irish society. It's testing our cohesion, our resilience, and actually probably indeed our ability to respond. And whilst naturally this is first and foremost a public health challenge, it's also having and posing a very serious threat to the living standards and the livelihoods of the hundreds of thousands of Irish people. As the impact of the necessary public health measures are taking hold, many employers are facing very significant losses of revenue, and with the consequential impact on employment. And I think it's almost impossible probably to predict the scale of the employment loss. I know I'm on record of one day last week predicting that maybe some 400,000 jobs may go, but I actually believe that this is a conservative figure, because the job losses of the scale expected will pose a threat of significant societal effect. And I think that's why, since the crisis first began, we immediately introduced a system of emergency payments to get money into people's hands fast until we had designed a more robust response. And it's today that we're presenting that response. As well as the temporary wage scheme that Pascal and Heather have announced, we are announcing a substantial increase in the weekly rates of payments for the COVID-19 pandemic unemployment to €350 per week. And so where an employer can't retain a worker or avail of the supports of the temporary wage subsidy scheme, then that employee will be able to access the emergency COVID-19 unemployment payment, which is now at a substantially higher rate than it was when we introduced it only last week. This level of payment has been chosen for maximum impact, particularly for the workers that have been laid off in the sectors that have been most seriously affected. So, for example, the average take-home wage in the hospitality sector that has been so badly affected in the last week is approximately €403 per week. That's their take-home pay. And the new COVID payment of €350 is approximately 80% of the value of that normal take-home pay. In the retail sector, the average take-home pay is roughly €348 per week. So the new COVID-19 payment will in effect cover 100% of that value. And the rate, I hope, will greatly benefit most people who have suddenly found themselves out of work. And my department has strengthened our online facilities in the last week to make it easier for workers to apply not only for the COVID-19 employment supports but also the illness payments, and it's allowing us to speed up the payments. This payment will be an immediate payment. We will also process applications through the normal job seekers benefit route as well, because some of the people that will apply will be those with dependents and may actually qualify for a higher rate than the €350. And what we intend to do is to move those people as quickly as we can, based on the resources that we have in the department, to the new rate with the uplift if they are so if they qualify for it, and it will be backdated on any of the arrears paid from the date that they made the original payment. Additionally, the enhanced illness payment for those required to self-isolate or those people who have been diagnosed with coronavirus will be increased from €305 to €350 per week, bringing it in line with the new unemployment payment. So on foot of all these measures, no worker that loses their jobs should receive less than €350 per week. I think it's fair to say that unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures. And today's stimulus package will protect average earnings. I hope it's going to maintain demand, provide enhanced income supports for those people who are impacted by COVID-19, and ultimately position the economy to overcome the shock of this pandemic. I'd like to, as I hope I do every time I speak, just acknowledge genuinely the hard work of the people in our department who have done enormous work in the last week to try and get the some 118,000 people who came through our doors and made online applications into payment at the beginning of this week. So I just want to acknowledge that. I know we're going to have many more difficult days ahead, but I think we are confident that we can meet the challenges that everybody faces once we all stick together.
Time for more questions. We'll start with Christina Finn.
Can I just ask, in relation to the Leaving Cert, Minister Joe McHugh said that he intended that he wanted it to go forward. Was there any discussion about that at Cabinet? And just on the social welfare payments, just to clarify, on the normal job seekers allowance and payment, they're to remain the same at the 200 mark, is that correct?
Just on the issue of the Leaving Cert, Minister McHugh joined us by phone at Cabinet today. We're having unusual Cabinet meetings. We're in separate rooms, and some people coming in by video conference and others by voice conference, and that's done for the obvious reasons around social distancing, that none of us spend more than 2 hours in the same room together, and if a group of us get sick, there'll still be a core 8 group that can be the government. So he joined us from phone from Donegal, these actions apply until the 19th of April. So, obviously we're all hoping that schools might be able to come back in May and June and have the Leaving Cert in a normal way. But if that doesn't happen, he is working on contingency plans to allow the Leaving Cert to go ahead. The Junior Cert also, if possible, but obviously the Leaving Cert is more important. And also college exams as well. So we'll do everything possible or feasible that we can to allow the Leaving Cert to go ahead so that that group of young people can start college as normal in September or October, if that's possible. And I'd encourage them all to continue studying for those exams, because there's a very good chance that they are going to happen.
So, Christine, the base rate is still €203. The qualified adult rate, the qualified children's rate, supplementary welfare allowances, supplementary rent allowances are all part of the package of measures that are available to job seekers before last week. So they're all still the same. Yeah.
Next question, Cormac McQuinn, please.
This is probably a question for either Minister Donoghue or Minister Doherty, or both. People who've lost their jobs have pressing need for money. When can they expect the increased COVID payment to be paid? For employers who are considering whether or not they keep on staff, when exactly can they expect the increase, the wage subsidy for them to be paid? And then a question for the Taoiseach. Government formation talks have moved at a snail's pace so far. At this point, with an escalating crisis, shouldn't they be accelerated? Don't we need a stable, secure government at this time? And would you encourage the Green Party to get back involved in those talks?
So the payment will start this Friday, Cormac?
And the subsidy that will be made available to employers will commence on Thursday and Friday. So if the legislation passes through the Dáil on Thursday evening, the Revenue Commissioner is ready to go. And the analysis that we have responded back to is that as we see demand in more parts of our economy begin to decline, income is rapidly falling. The Taoiseach, in recognition of this, asked myself, Heather and Regina to put together a response back to all of this over the last number of days, and this is what we have done in this package. In an environment due to public health guidance in which demand is falling quicker and quicker, the income of more and more companies is falling as fast as that, and the vista that Regina painted of a huge unemployment challenge approaching our country is what this package of measures is designed to tackle. Because what we are looking to do, through working across all government departments, is put in place measures that for employers at the moment who are considering making somebody unemployed, to get them to access this subsidy, move into this scheme, and then when the economy recovers, through the work that Heather and Regina do through their departments, then have citizens who still have a relationship with their employer, hopefully are still working with them in some way, ready to go. And this scheme is really fast, it's really quick, and it is designed to anticipate a great challenge and to do our best to reduce the scale of it.
Cormac, just to answer your question, as I'm sure you can understand, the focus for government has been and has to be on dealing with the Covid-19 emergency and all of its aspects, health, economic and international. And all of us here spent today focused on that. In fairness, the opposition will be focused on it too, because the Dáil is meeting on Thursday, the Seanad on Friday. I'll be attending the European Council by video conference on Thursday, where we're going to be talking about coordinating the member states, but also the particular impact that this is going to have on the national debts of the 27 member states and everything that will flow from that. So our job has to be focused on Covid-19, on this health and economic emergency. But to the extent that we can find time, we are finding time for those negotiations. And certainly the Taoiseach, Minister Humphreys, Minister Donoghue will be involved in talks tomorrow with Fianna Fáil to see if we can agree a common paper on the way forward. And we are open to talking to the Greens, Labour, Social Democrats, other groups that may wish to speak to us. But the priority has to be Covid-19, and I think people would expect no less.
Just in relation to agency staff that work within the HSE, hi, I'm up here. I assume that they also can avail of the sick pay because they, when they work in the HSE, they don't normally have sick pay, so they can avail of it. But also, is there any conversation about childcare workers who have lost their jobs in the various creches that have closed down and how they may be re-employed to look after kids of parents who are on the front lines?
Agency workers are self-employed, so they are covered. They'll get the full $350 a week if they have to self-isolate. Some agency workers are also PAY as well as self-employed, but the short answer to your question is yes. There is a lot of work being done led by Minister Zapone around childcare, around what we can do to make sure that the childcare sector bounces back quickly when we're able to reopen it, and also to see if we can do something in the interim to provide childcare for key workers, people working in the health service, but also people working beyond that in lots of other key sectors as well. But the creches and nurseries and early childhood education centres were closed for public health reasons, so it's not just straightforward to reopen them, but work is being done led by Minister Zapone on that, and we'd hope to get somewhere in the next couple of days, if not next week.
There is time for some more questions. If everyone can stick to one question, it would be much appreciated. Arthur, please.
Question for Mr. Donoghue. Will an emergency budget be required if you have to prolong this wage subsidy scheme beyond the initial period? Thank you.
The answer to that question, Arthur, will depend on the duration of the crisis that we are in. By the passage of the legislation and work that we have already done on our budgets for 2020, I believe we will be able to sustain the early part of our response back. But the longer this challenge goes on, the more likely it is that I will have to work within the Dáil to look at how we can strengthen our ability to do it. But that's actually an element in our thinking here, because what we are looking to do is look at how we can intervene very quickly and at scale at the start of this great economic difficulty. And by doing that, not only we hope offer support to our citizens, but also intervene in trying to prevent more and more jobs being lost. Because the core of a healthy economy are good jobs, and a lot of them, and they're being lost at the moment, and more could be lost in the future. And the more successful we are preventing that, the more likely it is that we can at least be close to a budgetary framework for 2020 that we outlined in 2019.
If I could follow up on that, you say that the package is around €3.7 billion to last around 12 weeks. How confident are you that you'll be able to access a similar amount of money if these measures needed to be extended?
Well, I am confident that our state will be able to access the funding that we need to deliver these measures. We came into 2020 with a growing surplus. It's fair to say that all of that has now been used in responding back to the public health needs that we had just over 2 weeks ago, and also due to the very sudden decline in tax revenue that's very likely to take place in March as a result of the huge change in economic activity within our country. I am confident that due to the approach that Taoiseach has taken in supporting me in all of the different budgets I've done, the work that we have done in moving from deficit to surplus, that we will be able to access funding and will be able to draw upon reserves that we both have as a country ourselves and, if we need to, borrow further to respond back to this great challenge. As you'll know, there is a meeting of European finance ministers taking place tonight. And the common theme that everybody now has, and I know the Taoiseach will be addressing this as well later on in the week when he talks with heads of government, is how countries can pay for their response back to a virus that knows no boundaries or knows no national borders. And we'll need to engage with each other regarding how we can do that.
Taoiseach, is there anything you can say to people who would be watching this at home who would be afraid about all the new measures that are coming in and that sort of thing? Is there anything you say to reassure them?
Well, I think we're all a little bit afraid, and it's perfectly natural and normal to be a little bit afraid. You know, we can all see what's happening in Spain, what's happening in Italy, only 2 or 3 hours flight from here, and that frightens us all. But what I can say to people is that we have a slight advantage in Ireland in that we're a little bit further away from those countries, further away from the centre of the outbreak, and that has given us time to put in place a comprehensive strategy, one that will minimise the number of people who are infected and maximise the number of people who survive COVID-19. And we've had that advantage, if you like, that bit of time to put in place the strategy that we believe works best, and certainly has worked best in places like South Korea and Singapore, where they haven't had the number of deaths anyway approaching what we've seen, for example, in European countries. And that's the model that we're following. But we really need people to work with us. We're getting great support and great work from our health service, from our public servants, from the supply chain, from everyone. But we really need the whole of the general public to get behind our health service, our health workers, and look after and protect people who may become sick by following the advice that's being given. And it really is in our hands. I think somebody said on the radio that doctors can save hundreds of people in hospitals and ICUs, but actually the general public can save thousands of people, certainly hundreds of people, if we adhere and if we follow the advice that our public health experts are giving us.
Taoiseach, in announcing the restrictions here, you say that you'd always like to have policing by consent, not coercion. It's always the way we've done things. But if people do ignore the sanctions, the restrictions, and if they endanger public health, will there be any sanctions at all? Will there be any detentions, any fines proposed, anything like that?
I don't think we've provisioned for fines, but obviously there are powers that the Gardaí have since last week to detain people, and also there's other legislation, for example, under the Public Order Act, and there's legislation under the 1947 Health Act that actually is very far-reaching. That was brought in place for public health emergencies a long time ago relating to TB and diphtheria. So there are powers there, and if we have to legislate for more powers, well, then we can. But I really think and I really believe that the best way that we can achieve the best outcome is for Irish people to be at their best and to look out for each other, to understand the risks, to avoid getting the infection themselves, and to avoid affecting people who are vulnerable, older people and people with chronic diseases who really are at high risk from this virus. And I think we're a good people. And, you know, even though we did see some scenes that were not good at the weekend, by and large, people have been following the advice. As the CMO would say, most people most of the time are doing the right thing, and that's kind of what we need to continue. We just need to step it up a bit more.
We have to leave it there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to cut away there from the government press conference there at government buildings, and we are going to go to a commercial break. Don't go far. We'll be back with plenty of reaction and analysis to the government's emergency response to the COVID-19 pandemic just after this short break. And you're very welcome back to this news special programme. Let's recap on some of the key measures announced by the government over the course of the last hour. We heard Taoiseach Líof Varadkar asking people to stay at home if at all possible. Social gatherings to be restricted to 4 people unless, as he clarified there, those people are from the same household. He has announced the closure of all schools, universities and childcare facilities will be extended beyond the 19th, or certainly to the 19th of April. Also, non-essential retail outlets, they will close, and we will see an increased Garda presence in all of our public parks. Moving on to the stimulus package, the COVID-19 pandemic unemployment payment is set to increase to €350 from €203 initially. Self-employed who are affected by this virus, they are included in the measures announced today by government. COVID-19 illness payment will also be increased and come in line with the unemployment payment to €350 per week, and those payments will start from this Friday. And we're talking about the scheme lasting a period of some 12 weeks initially. Let's have a word with Robert Short first. Something we heard time and time again today, Robert, is the importance of maintaining the link between employer and employee, that's a key part of these measures in order that the economy will bounce back as quickly as possible after this emergency.
Yeah, the Minister for Finance saying that the core of a healthy economy are good jobs and plenty of them, and that if you break that link, you will inflict damage on the economy, and it'll be much more difficult when this passes, and it will pass, for the economy to recover. So it's much more important to keep people within their jobs, even if they can't do as much as normal under the circumstances, but they maintain the connection with their skills, with their employer, so that the bounce back then can be much more immediate, and that they are maintaining income and spending levels as well.
Louise O'Reilly is also standing by, a health spokesperson with Sinn Féin. Louise, your assessment of what we heard today from the government?
Well, I think it leaves an awful lot of questions unanswered. I think we're, still going to have tens of thousands of workers tomorrow going into workplaces where they can't effectively do physical distancing. Now, obviously, it's welcome that cafes and restaurants are to close. That's something that Sinn Féin have been calling for quite a while now. It's good that the government have caught up with that. But unfortunately, there isn't a guarantee of 100% of income for any grade group or category of worker. Sinn Féin's proposals would have guaranteed that income 100% up to €525. And I think people are still going to be asking, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to make sure that the light is kept on? And how can I ensure that I'm in, a good enough condition to be able to return back to work? Because people do need to go back to work. They do need to be focused on that.
Presumably, the element around private healthcare is something that you would welcome. Effectively, what we will be looking at for the next period of time is a one-tier health system where patients would be treated on the basis of clinical need.
We've been advocating for a one-tier health service for decades. Unfortunately, this is only temporary. What we want to see actually is an elimination in the long term of the two-tier health service. Of course, the availability of capacity is very, very welcome. It should have been in the system, I think, before now. Other countries moved an awful lot quicker on this, but we do need to maximise that capacity. We also need to address the very, very serious issue of personal protective equipment for our frontline healthcare workers, including home helps, home carers, as well as people in hospitals and in the community. I think that needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency. Those people are out there on the front line. They are putting themselves in harm's way. They need to know that they can have all all of the PPE that they require. And they need to know that we have a steady supply, that it's not just going to be one shipment or one container, that we have a steady supply. And actually what Sinn Féin are advocating is that we repurpose some of the factories that will unfortunately be closed and some of the workers that will be laid off, that we put them to working on making PPE, just like we've seen with the O'Neill's factory in the north. We want to see that rolled out. That way we can guarantee our own supply of PPE for our vital frontline healthcare workers, which is absolutely essential.
Louise, thank you so much for your time. Conal, something we touched on a little earlier was the affordability of all this. We're looking at 3.7 billion. That's just to cover the 12 weeks. We heard Paschal Donohoe saying that although our sovereign credit rating is pretty stable at the moment, we are looking at the cost of borrowing going up.
Potentially. We have to need to remember the ECB is doing quantitative easing, so Ireland can borrow close to zero or even at negative rates. I suppose one statistic a lot of people aren't aware of is at the end of last year, we had actually had 17 billion in cash. The NTMA has been issuing debt at very long-term maturities. It's been issuing debt to sort of fund itself 12 to 18 months in advance. So we're well able to spend this money. The question is what happens to the deficit. Right. That's 6.7 billion now, announced in just the last couple of weeks. That's 2% of GDP almost. We'd be running a deficit of 2% of GDP. And then there's the hit to the economy itself.
2% of GDP, and that's before we see the contraction in the economy. Absolutely. That's likely to happen as a result of this.
And on that very point, a very striking statistic there from Regina Doherty, 118,000 COVID-19 welfare payments applications in the system.
In a week.
That's equivalent to 5% of employment. So if that's true, we could certainly see our unemployment rate for almost 5%, really rocket in the next couple of weeks up towards almost 10%, potentially.
And the question, of course, is how long can we sustain this kind of spending, particularly, and there wasn't mention made of it there today, but the debt overhang, largely regarded as one of the biggest national debts in the developed economies.
Well, we certainly haven't cured our public debt issue. If you look at the EU finance ministers last night saying that the rules of the Stability and Growth Pact will be eased because of this crisis, so we're not going to get in trouble with the European Commission. The ECB is there keeping funding costs down. But again, the real question is how long does this last? Yes. 3.7 billion for 12 weeks, that's mid-June. If the impact of the virus goes on beyond that, the costs and the deficit we're going to run and the impact of the economy is just going to increase even more so. But having said that, we are beginning from a position of strength where we ran a surplus. We can afford to run a deficit of 4, 5, 6, even 7% of GDP without, I think, our credit rating or our debt GDP ratio exploding. The real key issue here is how long will the economic hit and the measures to address the virus last? Is it going to be 3 months, 6 months into 2021?
And that's a question that nobody can answer. Let's have a quick word now with Stephen Donnelly, Fianna Fáil spokesperson on health. Mr. Donnelly, thanks for joining us on the programme. Your assessment of what was unveiled today by this government?
Well, I have to say we welcome the advice from the Chief Medical Officer and from the National Public Health Emergency Team, and we think that the government is right to implement these measures. There are some worrying signs in there. Obviously, it's of great concern that 1 in 4 of the confirmed cases are healthcare professionals. That needs to be looked into in detail. Healthcare professionals are getting in touch. They're saying that they're worried about the stocks. Now, the HSE are doing, I believe, everything they can to get these new orders landed, but the timelines on when they're landing seem to be slipping. So we just need to reassure our healthcare professionals that everything can and will be done for them. Certainly, a lot of the measures that have been announced de facto are already in place. And I think it's a great testament to every person, to our healthcare professionals, to every family and to the businesses that a lot of the social distancing measures are in place. A lot of the businesses have already closed down. A lot of the ones that have to stay open are already obeying social distancing. I think what we're seeing today is a half step in terms of trying to get a little bit tighter. But there are some reassuring signs. That growth rate is coming down, so it was up at around 35% a day in terms of new cases. We saw it at about 25% yesterday, and it is trending downwards, which is very important. I think one of the things that was said at the press conference we can't emphasise enough. Our healthcare professionals are working night and day to get the healthcare system ready so that if we have this surge of critically ill people, that everything can be done for them. But it is down to every single one of us, every individual, every family, every business, every community. It is only we who will be able to slow down and ultimately beat this and really support each other, reach out to vulnerable groups in the difficult weeks and months ahead.
Stephen Donnelly, thank you indeed for your time today. We're going to lead to another commercial break, but we'll be back in just a couple of moments. And you're very welcome back to this RTE News special. We're going to cross over now to Dr. Mary Futher, who has been waiting by patiently. Thank you so much, Dr. Futher. I wanted to get your reaction overall on what we heard, but also on that contribution by the Chief Medical Officer when he said that our social interactions need to reduce by something in the order of 75%.
Yeah, I think today's announcement, while hard to hear sitting here as a citizen, is a very welcome one from a medical point of view as a general practitioner. And I absolutely would support Tony Holohan, the Chief Medical Officer's statement that we need to reduce our social interactions, or our distancing, I think is a better way of describing it, even further.
Right.
If we do nothing, each person who's infected with COVID-19 will give it on average to 8 people. And we really need to reduce that down to less than 1. So we'd ask people to really reduce their social interactions, and that's what today's announcements are about, and they're really important.
There were some encouraging signs, though, were there not? I think it was also Dr. Tony Holohan that said that the number of contacts that we're seeing when somebody tests positive, that's reducing from 20 to 5. So people are listening, and clearly the social distancing measures that are in place are working to a certain extent.
Oh yes, I think they are, and I think we have shown exceptional social solidarity on this, and that as a community we're lifting together. We can always do more. I see it in my own practice here in Cork that patients have been extraordinarily positive. They've been very careful. They're keeping their distance. They acknowledge all the things they need to be doing. They take advice really well, and they are quite happy to access the internet, look up the advice on the HSE websites, get it from other family members, and we just need to reiterate that message. So when the Minister and the Taoiseach say, by all means, visit family, yes, indeed, it's important to have that social contact. However, it could be done from a distance. It could be done in the garden if the weather's fine. It could be done across the glass. It should be always about thinking, presume you've got it and you don't want to give it, as opposed to, can I not get it? And if we could frame it like that, I think we'd make very significant progress. And I think it's just a question of us lifting even further. And we're doing it already. There's more to do.
And the Taoiseach making the point that all of this is designed to build capacity in the system, and also to give us the time to source ventilators and other vital equipment that may well be needed in the months ahead, weeks and months ahead.
Yes, and there have been issues with supply, but it's catching up and it's getting there. And as general practitioners, we're receiving our personal protective equipment, the gear as we call it. It's really important because we'll be seeing the undifferentiated respiratory problems, all the different issues that can present at a first stage. We, as general practitioners, will be trying our utmost to try and keep people away and out of hospitals. And the public have already been very cooperative in that. But there's lots of supply chain issues. There's lots of things that factor on equipment arriving, but we're making progress.
And as the Taoiseach said, we're not in lockdown mode, and he was at pains to make that point. But are you saying then, Doctor, that overall these measures suffice for where we are at the moment? Or should he have gone that bit further?
I think it's always important that we take our advice from the experts in public health and the Department of Health. They have the science, they have the evidence. They taking, as the Taoiseach said, they're taking their direction from the WHO. I think there's always more that an individual can do, and it's about us taking individual actions. I don't think it's necessary that we go to a mandatory lockdown, and I agree that the term lockdown is problematic. I think, though, individuals need to function and work as if that were the case. And I think we need as a society to find positive and good ways that we can say to our neighbours, look, I need to stand a bit further away. I'm not really sure that that's a good idea. And give gentle support and advice how that might be best done.
Okay.
If we have to move to more stringent measures, I'm sure we will in due course, but we'll take direction on that.
Thank you so much for your time today, Doctor. Let's cross over now to our industry and employment correspondent, Ingrid Miley, who's standing by. Ingrid, a 3.7 billion package of measures. How do you think it'll be received by workers and their employers?
Well, I suppose it's better than the alternative, Sharon. 3.7 billion, as you say, an awful lot of money over a 12-week period. And remember, it's in addition to the 2.4 billion that was set aside when they introduced the enhanced COVID sick pay some weeks ago. But there are a couple of things that are interesting about this. Number one, we now have on the enhanced welfare payments, we now have differentiated welfare payments because, for example, the a job seeker benefit for somebody laid off due to COVID has gone from 203 to 350. But if you've been laid off and have been unemployed for some time or prior to the crisis, you're still only getting €203. Similarly, for illness benefit, the 305 has been increased to 350. But if you have a broken leg, for example, you still only get 203. So that's an issue that is, that is very stark at the moment. Now, the other thing is that employers are under no obligation to top up the wage subsidy scheme. I've literally just got off the phone from somebody in the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection who said they're strongly encouraging employers to pay this, but there is no obligation to do so. So I think it remains to be seen how many employers are likely to top up this baseline, if you like, safety net that the government is putting in place.
Ingrid, thank you. Final word to you, Robert Short. I mean, this is something of a waiting game, isn't it, to see just whether these measures will work over the next 12 weeks, where we are then too.
Well, look, I guess during these 12 weeks, our attention is going to be focused on the public health story here, how well that's going, what the challenges are for our healthcare system. This puts in place at least a safety net. There will be problems with it. There will be teething problems. There will, as Ingrid pointed out there's no compunction on employers to subvent to add to the wage subsidy scheme. There doubtless be hundreds of questions about how this is going to actually work in practice. It is, as I said earlier, policy making on the fly to cover extremely complex scenarios. But at least we have an indication that the government are taking it extremely seriously. They've more than doubled the amount of money they initially threw at this problem. An additional €3.7 billion to be spent over 12 weeks is a significant impact in terms of trying to maintain the momentum in the economy.
And we didn't even mention the new legislation that freezes rents, that prevents evictions, that has been approved by the Cabinet today. Yeah, well, that I suppose just puts on the statute books some of the measures that were announced last week. I think one of the things that will be quite interesting is just what shops will be told to close, just what factories will deemed to be not essential, what construction sites. That there was a list. There was a list in terms of the businesses that will close, the retail businesses, but when it comes to factories and job sites, for me at least, there was a question mark over quite how that would apply, and he mentioned that the involvement of the HSE, the Health and Safety Authority, in trying to bring in the social distancing, the physical distancing protocols to see whether they could apply to certain production processes and to certain job sites in terms of the construction industry, because we know that there are essential health infrastructure projects being built right now. They're going to be needed. So there's still an awful lot of work to do, I think, to bring all of this together. All right, we'll have plenty more on this story and the rest of the COVID-19 news coming up at 6 o'clock. Signed news is after the break, but my thanks to all our guests on this programme. For now, thank you.